welcome to the State of Football Season 2, Episode 15, here on a Monday morning, August 23rd, 2021. Chopping it up here today with Ralph Ventre. First of all, Ralph, how are you doing this morning? How's it going?
Great. Another weekend of preseason football in the books, and I'm really looking forward to the regular season. So it's always good when you get to wake up on a Monday morning and talk some football. So and even, no offense to Rick. Of course, we miss Rick. He's just taking a day off. But it's always good to chop it up with mein Bruder von Deutschland.
I really appreciate that, Ralph, and obviously, Ralph, I tell people all the time what an impressive German speaker you are, so maybe someday we need to start a podcast or do a live show and just do it in German. That might be something that we have to do, that we have to end up doing. But first of all, before we get into the preseason action, I got sad news for everyone. Former Rams scout Danton Bardo has tragically passed away at age 50. He was a linebacker at Memphis football and also coached indoor football. He was on the show, and he was very sick in the last couple of days, and it's very tragic. Rest in peace to Danton, and we're praying for his family. So yeah, just those are the really bad news this morning, and I think the football world has really lost a good man who was always looking out for also young and aspiring scouts, always giving them tips, trying to help them out.
Yeah, of course, that's sad news here, Lorenz. Not exactly how you want to start the week, but may he rest in peace. And as you know, he was a member of Rick's NFL Draft Bible family. So we're sending our best out to his family at this difficult time.
Absolutely, thank you for that, Ralph. But now let's get into the preseason, into the action. It started off on Friday. The New England Patriots had their second game. Let's start off with that because that was the first game that was going on Friday, August 20th. You're a Bills fan. You're obviously the president of Bills Mafia, Ralph. But the Patriots, they're looking good. Won 35-0. Mac Jones had another really good outing. 13 of 19 for 146 yards. They had some running backs, some rookies, some young players making plays. Jacoby Myers really separating himself against maybe a bit of a rough Eagles secondary. But what do you make of the Patriots? What do you make of their revamped roster and this start into the season?
Well, a couple things with the Patriots. First, I thought they looked really good running the ball, actually, and I think they're going to rely on the run game a lot, whether it's Cam Newton as the starting quarterback or Mac Jones as the starting quarterback. We could get into who we think that is going to be a little later, but in either situation, I see this team kind of relying heavily on the run. I really don't see any great playmakers out there, though. You mentioned Jacoby Myers. To me, Jonnu Smith is an all-around great football player. He's a good tight end. He's good run blocking, which I think is one of the reasons why the Patriots paid him so much money this offseason. But even Jonnu Smith, I mean, he's not a George Kittle or Travis Kelce. So I think that this team lacks the star power on offense. With that said, if you're looking for a general prediction of what I've seen so far in the preseason, and of course you're grading the preseason on a curve and, you're taking some things with a grain of salt, so to speak. But from what I've seen from the Patriots, I think they're probably an 8-9 win team. Maybe if everything goes right, they get to 10 wins. Their defense will be improved naturally from last year's unit just because they had so many COVID opt-outs. But it will be a different looking a lot of different faces than what they had in 2020. Everyone, the old adage is you can never underestimate Bill Belichick. And that's another debate we could get into, because I don't think Bill Belichick is as great of a coach without Tom Brady. He's not the greatest coach of all time unless he has Tom Brady with him. But that's maybe an argument for another show. But I think you'll see an improved Patriots team. I'm not all mesmerized by Mac Jones just yet. I think Baldy was out there on Twitter saying Mac Jones looked really good, just surgical in the way he's been operating. And obviously, Jones has shown some positives, but it's another debate we can go down is, do you start the rookie quarterback? Because I truly believe if you start a rookie quarterback, any team that does is basically giving up that year. You may hit it right, and you may get to the playoffs with a rookie quarterback. I'm not saying that is mission impossible, but in more cases than not, when you're starting a rookie quarterback, it's about developing that quarterback, getting that quarterback to grow. I don't care how NFL ready a quarterback is or how good a quarterback is. They still need live reps at this level. The speed is different. The processing speed of everything is a lot faster than if they played in the SEC or if they played at Wyoming. Peyton Manning, I think, was 3-13 as a rookie quarterback. You go all the way back to Troy Aikman. What were they, like 1-15? It rarely do rookie quarterbacks burst onto the scene and take you to the playoffs. And I think the Patriots, they want to win now. They'll start Cam Newton. And if it goes south, they'll bring in Mac Jones for the rest of the season and really get his feet wet, so to speak. But I know that's a lot for you. You wanted my thoughts on the Patriots. There you go. The bottom line, they are not a threat to the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills should win, barring injury to number 17. The Bills should win the AFC East running away.
I think to do that, you'll actually have to jump through a table to make that happen. But there's still a couple. There's still 2 more weeks until the real regular season starts, so you still got time to do that, Ralph. We talked about that before, but that's still something that needs to happen. But on a serious note, I think this is obviously a Patriots offense that, like you said, run game, and then I think attacking the middle of the field with the passing game, and that sort of has always been their MO, getting the ball out quickly. They've always been good with slot receivers. I think even a guy like a Jacoby Myers is someone who does some of his best work on the intermediate level with those dig routes and things like that, moving the football with his ability to separate. And now you really got to decide, do you want Mac Jones, who might be a little more consistent as a passer at this time and a little more accurate than a Cam Newton? But also with Cam, we saw it last year before he had COVID and he had his issues. He was really a running threat for this team, so it really boosted the run game that they didn't just have the running backs, but also Cam Newton out as the quarterback always gives you one more body to block, and that's obviously something that they might want to work into. But I think that's going to be a tough transition. You talked about, hey, if they struggle, you bring in Mac Jones, but those are 2 very different quarterbacks, so you're going to be running a completely different offense with Cam Newton than what you're going to be running with Mac Jones. So I'm guessing that's going to be a very tough transition. Do you anticipate the same? So are you saying it would have to be a throwaway year for Mac Jones to see the field this year?
To me, if I'm the Patriots, or actually I should rephrase that, what I think, and I have no inside information, but what I think the Patriots are thinking right now is they'll ride with Cam Newton up until they realize they can't make the playoffs. And then when they're eliminated, so to speak, then you bring in Mac Jones, and really there won't be as much pressure on him to win games either if you're eliminated. So that could be a positive as well. Probably easier to learn in that environment. I think that the Patriots brought back Cam Newton for a reason. And I think Cam Newton is a shadow of the MVP we saw 6 years ago. But his arm strength is diminished. With that said, he still has a great amount of experience, and he still is a remarkable weapon in the run game. You know, I think he led the Patriots in rushing last year at one. Maybe I'm wrong there, but or at least rushing touchdowns. You know, he's a weapon in the run game that not everyone has. And you're right, the Patriots offense has to be tailored differently when Newton is the starter or Newton is the quarterback as opposed to Mac Jones. So I don't know if that's as big of, you know, that may be a bigger transition to make mid-season. With that said, Mac Jones surprisingly looks kind of athletic. You know, he's not as big of a statue as I thought he was. You know, he's not exactly Drew Bledsoe or Peyton Manning down there. I think he could tuck it and run a little bit, but obviously not nearly as well as Cam Newton. I believe Cam Newton is arguably the most prolific rushing quarterback in the history of the NFL. He may have the most rushing touchdowns of any NFL quarterback of all time. I should have this information for you and for our viewers, but I feel pretty confident in saying that. I mean, we could probably do a quick Google search now, but whatever. No, two different types of quarterbacks, two different styles, but I think they ride with the veteran first and see how much they can get out of Cam Newton, and then they go over to Mac Jones. I don't know. Do you see a benefit of them starting Mac Jones week one and just going right into it?
I mean, to me, it's tough with Mac Jones. I was a little lower on him coming out of college. I said I wouldn't necessarily invest a first-round pick into Mac Jones, but I get why they did. I just don't think his upside and his ceiling is all that high. If I invest a first-round pick into a quarterback, especially a first half of the first round, I want to have the potential to get a guy like a Josh Allen who can maybe struggle at first, but down the road can be very good. I think Mac Jones at the end of the day is going to be capped as that sort of serviceable starter that maybe in a perfect world would be a very strong backup. I just don't see him being that guy that can elevate your offense. That said, I just think it's tough for him to get on the field this season unless they're very bad. If he doesn't win the job week one, until I think their bye is fairly late. Don't nail me down on this, but I think they have a week 12 bye or something like that. I just don't see him taking the field before that. That's why I asked. Just because it's just a tough transition because they're completely different players. That's why I asked you. I think that makes a lot of sense if they're out of the playoff race. Say you go into that bye week and you really aren't looking likely to make the playoffs. I could see them making a switch, but I don't think Mac Jones sees the field in the first half of the season unless he's the week one starter, which I also don't see happening. I just think, like you said, they brought Cam back for a reason. Cam was actually really solid to start the season last year before he had his health issues. So I think he's going to be the starter there week one, and we'll just see what happens to Mac down the road, but I'm not expecting to see too much of him unless somehow they name him the week one starter.
Well, I felt similarly to you on Mac Jones coming out of college, and to me, I don't want to hold it against these quarterbacks, but to me, it's always hard to grade these Alabama quarterbacks, so to speak, because at Alabama, they don't have to throw these receivers open, so to speak. These receivers automatically have 4 steps on any defensive back. The talent is incredible. They don't have to make the tough throws and fit it in to the tight windows that they do in the NFL. I mean, you've seen guys at Alabama look tremendous, and they just, as it turns out, they don't translate well into NFL quarterbacks because they don't have the physical tools, primarily arm strength. And I'm talking about a guy like Greg McElroy. I'm talking about a guy like A.J. McCarron, who won, 2 national championships at Alabama, And then most recently, when you have Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith and all these guys pick your All-American receiver, it's a lot easier for Tua to play quarterback at Alabama than for the Miami Dolphins. So, to me, it's always hard to get a true read on these Alabama quarterbacks. And that's not their fault that they played for such a great college team. But with that said, I think that the Alabama system and the Alabama talent can sometimes make these guys look a lot better than they really are. But if you want to get into quarterback debate here and rookie quarterbacks, you mentioned Mac Jones. That's a guy who I didn't believe it for 1 second, but that's a guy who was rumored to go to the San Francisco 49ers. But we know they take Trey Lance, who was probably – they had eyes on Trey Lance all along, and I don't know if they were playing games in the media, trying to fool people. But they take Trey Lance, and that's a guy, Trey Lance, who has the physical ability, but I wouldn't roll the dice with him if I'm the Niners for this season, because there are going to be growing pains with him, as there will be with any rookie quarterback. And I think the Niners are probably ready to make the playoffs. So I would just go with Jimmy G. With that said, if Jimmy G is just terrible for the first 3 weeks, okay, then maybe you go to Trey Lance. But the thing is, I see Trey Lance is going to need growth. I want to compare him to a guy I watch very closely in Josh Allen, okay? A guy who needed to grow, who went from Wyoming to the NFL. This guy's going from North Dakota State to the NFL. They need a year. And you saw Josh Allen's rookie year, he struggled. He also didn't have a very good supporting cast. As a matter of fact, I think his top 3 receivers on that team are no longer in the NFL. So he didn't really have much help. But with that said, he struggled, but he showed the flashes of brilliance. He showed the arm strength, which to me is so key. He showed the athleticism. And the reason why I bring up Josh Allen, Trey Lance, is because I saw a tweet last night, and it was like, it was early when Trey Lance came on early in the game, and I guess there were a few incompletions, but he was rifling the ball in there. And the tweet was something to the effect of like, hey, young guy, take it easy. You're not throwing these bullets every throw. Like, put some touch on the ball and let the receivers do the work. But that reminded me of Josh Allen as a rookie, because Josh Allen, it seemed like he would almost break his receivers' hands. He would fire it in there. But now he's gotten better with putting touch on the ball. And I think that, I don't know, Trey Lance is not going to be Josh Allen, or maybe he will be. Who knows? I'm not trying to say that. But there's definitely a comparison there when you look at 2 guys who are both extremely gifted physically, both with great arm strength, both who came from the lower half of Division I, so to speak. You have to learn how to play quarterback in the NFL. And even the most talented ones and the most NFL-ready ones still need developmental time. whether that's in practice every day during the week or in game action.
You're absolutely right, and let's get into Trey Lance a little bit, into his preseason, into his second game of the preseason. First of all, shout out to Tommy Goodhines, the rest of the people in the chat room. Just saying, Cam Newton is the best running, has the most rushing touchdowns for a quarterback. Second is Steve Young there. So I think you talked about most.
And I think he said Jack Kemp, number 3, the late Jack Kemp.
Yes,
Buffalo
he did with
Bills
40. 3 shy
star
of
of
Steve
the
Young.
1960s and a former vice presidential candidate in the 1996 U.S. presidential election. So Jack Kemp, really a legendary football player and a legendary man. So I did not realize he was number 3 overall with 40 rushing touchdowns. So what was that, Goodhines in the chat? Thank you.
Yes. Yep,
Tom Goodhines
Tommy.
for that info.
And I didn't know he ran for vice president. So
yes, he was Bob Dole's vice presidential candidate, Republican vice presidential candidate in 1996, and of course Bill Clinton and Al Gore won re-election that year. But yeah, Jack Kemp was a Republican politician for some time. He was a champion of the gold standard. I don't know what folks know out there about economics and such, but Jack Kemp was a champion of the gold standard and sound monetary policy. So there you go, kids. I was actually a political science major in college. So there's your lesson for the day. Jack Kemp, a true throwback. Unfortunately, our politicians today do not have as great an affinity for the gold standard and for sound monetary policy as the late Jack Kemp did. But anyway, back to Trey Lance.
I was going to say, let's go from gold standard to gold helmets to the San Francisco 49ers playing last night. Obviously leading into the morning almost, a very late game. I caught the highlights this morning because it's just the middle of the night for me. I'm a 49ers fan. I'm passionate about this team, but I don't know why I picked the West Coast team with all the time difference going on. But that's a conversation for another day. But like you said, I thought Trey Lance came out really rifling the football, really throwing the ball extremely hard over the middle, driving the ball. It looks really effortless for him, even if he takes a bit off. That's still a lot more arm than what guys like Mac Jones and Kyle Trask are showing, who we can get into in a little bit. So, like you said, I think physical traits wise, he showed it off again early and often with that arm, and also with his running ability. He had 2 or 3 very good runs, which is exciting to see. But what I liked the most was his ability once he settled in. So first of all, he did have a really nice touch pass. So he showed he does have that ability on a wheel route. He hit Trent Sherfield in stride really there in a 2-minute drill. But the most impressive thing I thought from Trey Lance, who was billed as extremely impressive on the whiteboard, very smart in terms of football IQ, has apparently spent a ton of time doing film work with the San Francisco 49ers. Multiple coaches have lauded him for that. He did a great job using his eyes, manipulating underneath defenders, especially in the red zone, threw 2 touchdowns. Also had that interception that was tipped because the pass was just thrown too hard. But I thought those were the signs that teams really want to see from these rookie quarterbacks. I mean, we saw Justin Fields out there. I thought there's still a bit of that missing. He's showing that arm. He's showing that rushing ability, and we can get into it in a little bit. And obviously it wasn't all great for Trey Lance, just 8 for 14. Did have that interception, some incompletions in there. Definitely some bad decisions. I think took a sack. So it wasn't all great, but I think the flashes there and what you see compared to last week with that being comfortable in the pocket, having more of an eternal clock. Hey, you can't just sit there like at North Dakota State where you were bullying everyone for 3 seconds and then eventually still tuck it and run. You got to make a quick decision. You got to know pretty much what you're going to do pre-snap, and I like that step. Now, it's only preseason, but I think it's really shown promise for Trey Lance, who I think is very likely to hit the field this season. Look, Kyle Shanahan, he had guys like Josh Allen coming into their stadium, or actually in the Cardinals stadium because they couldn't play out at Levi Stadium. But he had guys coming into their house pretty much that had the great arm strength, the mobility, the ability to make big plays, big time plays like Josh Allen. And he had Jimmy Garoppolo sitting on the sideline with a boot on his foot because he had hurt his ankle again. And now Jimmy Garoppolo, if he's out there, I think can be a capable quarterback. But hey, he can't make the throws and he can't do the things that Trey Lance does. So I think that's when Kyle Shanahan really, when the season ended, a really disappointing year after going to the Super Bowl. They looked at college tape and I agree with you. I think they probably saw, and he saw, some of Josh Allen, some of that arm and that mobility and that just explosive playmaking that beat him at home in Trey Lance. And I think that's why he's hungry, Shanahan is, and he really wants Trey Lance to get out there. I think he's got a lot of plans for him, but I don't think he'll rush it. So if he doesn't end up being ready, if Jimmy Garoppolo is clearly the better option for this team, Jimmy Garoppolo will be the starter. But I think it's only a matter of time this season that Trey Lance sees the field. And like you said, it will be a roller coaster ride. You know, there'll be great games, there'll be some bad ones, but that's part of the deal. And Trey Lance, I think, just turned 21, so yeah, there's still a couple of years for him to still get better. But I'm excited about the flashes I saw last night. What about you?
Yeah, I would be excited if I were a 49ers fan as well. And actually, one of my close friends, a former colleague at the Northeast Conference, is from the San Francisco Bay Area, and he's moved back out there some years ago. And I just remember texting with him a lot during the draft process, and I told him I would be most excited with Trey Lance, and he was of the same mindset. So I assume a number of Niner fans are excited about this guy because physically, if you were to build an NFL starting quarterback, Trey Lance would be that mold. Maybe a little taller. I think Josh Allen is probably the ideal physical specimen. And to me, Josh Allen is, although he's a quote-unquote unicorn, he's not there was somebody prior to him, and it was someone who I was comparing him to when he was being drafted in 2018, and that's Cam Newton. When Cam Newton was healthy and coming out, he reminded me a lot like Josh Allen. He had a rocket for an arm. He had a howitzer before those shoulder problems. He was big like a linebacker, and he can run like a deer. And I saw a lot of Cam Newton and Josh Allen when Josh Allen was coming through the draft process. And I always said to myself, when the Bills drafted Allen, he looks a lot like Cam. He could be a Cam Newton type. And if this guy could ever be MVP, I would be happy. Well, he finished second last year. Maybe he can finish the deal this year. But I just want him to get us back to a Super Bowl. And it turns out I think we have a shot. So we'll see how it works out. But with that said, like if you're building a quarterback, to me, I want a guy who is as big and strong as a Josh Allen or a Cam Newton and has that arm strength and that athletic ability. And Trey Lance is that guy. He has the athleticism, the mobility, and the arm strength, just a little smaller. But I don't see him, if guys like Kyler Murray and can hold up over an NFL season physically, Trey Lance shouldn't have a problem either because he's bigger than those guys as well. And the argument with mobile quarterbacks are more likely to be injured, I don't know. I think that may be just a perception and probably not reality. I don't know how much data there is behind that. I mean, Cam did get beat up over his career, and you see the effects of that now. A lot of times they they wouldn't call penalties on these defenders who clearly committed a foul, but Cam didn't get that Brady treatment. It was like he got the opposite. But with that said, to me, football, anyone can get injured at any time, and even the non-contact injuries you see are out there. So basically, if you have a quarterback like a Trey Lance, unleash him. Use the legs. They are a weapon. Now, you don't want to get stupid. He shouldn't take extra hits or hits he doesn't need to. Get out of bounds when you can. Slide. Maybe not fight for that extra yard. It may not really be worth it. But don't shy away from using these physical attributes because, that's the one thing you heard about Josh Allen, or even when the Bills had Tyrod Taylor, you have a running quarterback, he's more likely to be hurt, blah, blah. I don't necessarily buy that. So with that said, it all goes back to the fact that Trey Lance is built like an NFL quarterback, and now it's just a matter of acclimation and can he process things mentally? Can he read defenses at this level? Can he start to make the right decisions and the quick decisions? And that will take time, but the physical ability is clearly there. There's no reason why physically Trey Lance shouldn't succeed as an NFL quarterback. And that's why the guy was drafted third overall out of North Dakota State, and even Carson Wentz, who was second overall out of North Dakota State. He's another guy that you looked at him physically, you're like, this guy should succeed at the NFL level. Nothing's a guarantee. And, of course, there's that mental side of the game that a lot of folks struggle with. But if you're looking at somebody just on paper, you can understand why the Niners drafted him, and you have to be excited about him.
You're absolutely right, and I think it's the physical ability that for quarterbacks like that obviously get you to get a foot in the door, get you to get drafted as highly as guys like Josh Allen and Trey Lance have. But like you said, I think down the road, and this is why I thought this was an exciting game for Trey Lance, it's really the mental ability and how much of a difference you can make with your eyes, looking off defenders, making sound decisions, and that's something we saw a huge step up in for Josh Allen this year. Obviously, and Stephon Diggs didn't hurt, but all in all, you can have the best receivers in the world if you're not making sound decisions all the time. You that can hurt you, and like you said, I think that's something that comes with playing. This is why if you get a rookie quarterback out there, there'll be some bad decisions. But that's what I thought was really impressive from Trey Lance's game, really showing the flashes of what he can be mentally with his eyes, looking off safeties, looking off defenders, making sound decisions, what he can be down the road on top of the physical talents. Hey, Josh Allen was always really physically talented, but he struggled out the gate. Now, it started making click, he started getting better with his processing, with his decision-making, and you almost have an MVP season on your hand last year. But let's get into the Buffalo Bills actually playing against the Chicago Bears led by Andy Dalton and Justin Fields, and we can get into those two in a bit. But Mitchell Trubisky against his former team on the road, obviously, the team that drafted him second overall back in 2017. Obviously didn't get re-signed, didn't get a new contract, going 20 of 28 for 221 yards and a touchdown. A lot of twos there. But Mitchell Trubisky, really an outstanding game for the Bills. What do you make of that? It is homecoming to Chicago, so to say.
Well, that was all in the first half, by the way. And he did that without Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, or Emmanuel Sanders. So Josh Allen sat, as did the Bills' top three veteran receivers. So his biggest target was Gabriel Davis. Jacob Hollister, the tight end pickup from Seattle, also made a couple nice catches for Trubisky. But that was 220 yards in the first half, 34 points. They scored touchdowns on their first four possessions, and then field goals on the next 2. So Trubisky is 6 for 6 on point-scoring drives. And it's great to see for a guy like that. The team seemed to really rally around him in the week leading up to the game. A number of Bills players mentioned that, Mitchell was going back to his old stomping ground and they wanted to see him do well and they were going to play hard for him. And obviously it was a great showing. And to me, Trubisky is a guy physically who should be a successful NFL quarterback. Again, now I don't know if maybe he just doesn't have it all mentally or it just wasn't a right fit for him in Chicago, too much pressure. Maybe the coaching staff wasn't coaching to Trubisky's ability, so to speak, or putting him in the best situation or tailoring the offense to him. But then again, with that said, I know he had some ugly performances in a Bears uniform. He was still 29-21 as a starting quarterback. He was 8 games over 500 as a starting quarterback with a couple of playoff appearances. And I think a lot of NFL teams would sign up for that tomorrow. And the Bills have this guy as a backup, and it was great to see him perform so well. And I honestly do think he's a very capable backup. He's probably the best number 2 quarterback in the NFL. But as a Bills fan, I do not want to see him take a single snap in the regular season. I'm praying that Josh Allen remains healthy for all 17 weeks. With that said, Trubisky is a great insurance policy for the Bills and a brilliant move by their front office. And it goes back to something you mentioned earlier with Cam Newton to Mac Jones. You may have to change the style of the offense. Trubisky can run the same offense as Josh Allen. He may not be as fast or as athletic, but he still can run the ball. He's still a big guy. He still has a big arm. And really, what you saw to me was kind of like a regular season game plan for the Bills in the first half, a game plan that they could have run with Josh Allen as the starter. And I think that offensive coordinator Brian Daboll actually was taking care of Trubisky and pulled out some of the stops for a preseason game and gave him basically the keys to the car. And that's the one thing, God forbid, Josh Allen had to miss 3 games in the middle of the season. Trubisky can come right in and run that same offense and hopefully win 2 of the 3 games for you. And before we get to we'll get to the Chicago quarterbacks, I'll segue there, and I'll start with Andy Dalton, and I'll say what was crazy to me was I saw that the Bills are paying Trubisky $2.5 million, 1-year deal, $2.5 million. The Bears gave Andy Dalton a 1-year deal for $10 million. Now, I know it's only preseason, but did Andy Dalton look 4 times more valuable than Mitchell Trubisky did on Saturday? I'll let you answer that question, Lorenz, because I don't know what the heck the Bears are doing. Maybe it was time to move on from Mitchell Trubisky, but the Bills give him $2.5 million, and he looks like a Pro Bowler, and the Bengals give Dalton $10 million, and he looks like somebody at the end of his career whose next move may be into retirement. I mean, I like Andy Dalton. He'll forever live in Bills history for ending the Bills playoff drought. But with that said, he did not look good as a Dallas backup last year, and I thought that was a great move by Dallas. I thought they wouldn't drop off as much when they lost Dak because they had a capable backup in Dalton, but he didn't look good last year. He doesn't look good now. What do you got? Do you just go with Justin Fields week 1? What were the Bears thinking by signing Dalton? Is it his team? There's a lot there to unpack, so I'll shut up and listen.
The red rifle, obviously. Yeah, I mean, he was obviously someone who, in the last couple of years with the Cincinnati Bengals, even I think in 2015, had a season, or at least the start of the season, where he almost had an MVP campaign when they won, I think, 12 or 13 games, wound up losing to the Steelers that season. But he had a really good start to that season. He was a decent starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, maybe take out the 2019 season, after which they then decided to obviously move on, had some injuries there, got benched. But like you said, I didn't think he was great at Dallas last year. This is a team that, hey, they had some injuries on the offensive line, but if you look at the offensive personnel, the receivers with Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup that they have, they were tremendous. They were putting up so many points when Dak was playing. I think Dak had like 400 yards he averaged in the first three weeks of last season, or high into 300s at least. Point is, they had tremendous production. Now, you didn't expect Andy Dalton to step in and do that, but I didn't think they'd have the drop-off, as you said. But there's definitely something with Andy Dalton where he's just not the type player that could run an offense, reliably be sort of a top 20 quarterback of 32 in the league. I think those days with him are just over. And let's get into Justin Fields. I think that's something where we just said it's really great to show those flashes. He had 4 runs for 46 yards. I think his speed was apparent in the first game. Hey, if you lose contain on this guy and he gets to start running, he's really fast. I think he was timed in the 4.3s by Ohio State. Now maybe there was some good ground to run on, maybe some wind that was blowing in his back that might have been hurrying him up a little bit there. But let's just say he's got legit speed. If it's 4.3 speed, I don't know, like I said. But that's certainly something that he's been showing off, running around, making plays outside of the pocket, using that arm, from different arm angles. Really what you want to see from a flashes type perspective. I didn't think he was that consistent when was that, 2 days ago? I thought there are definitely some steps that he has to take, like you said, mentally, to make the transition to be the starting quarterback. But hey, I don't think Andy Dalton gives you the chance to compete for the playoffs anymore. And let's look at Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace. I think they got to make the playoffs to keep this job, and that's not an easy division. I think Green Bay, they're getting Aaron Rodgers back. They've won 13 games last 2 years. They get an extra game, they might win 14. Hey, maybe they lose that extra game this year in a 17-game schedule, come back to 13, maybe only win 12, but they'll win a lot of games. I mean, say what you will about Aaron Rodgers, but he's back. Matt LaFleur's done a solid job. That's not going to be an easy team to beat. The Vikings are getting some players back. They're expected to be a lot better this year. And I think Detroit is multiple years away, but that's not going to be an easy team to just walk in and expect to win. Really good offensive line. They'll be able to run the ball a little bit. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Jared Goff, like I said, but it's not the easiest of divisions, and I just don't think Andy Dalton, as good as your defense is or is supposed to be with Khalil Mack and all of these Roquan Smith and Akeem Hicks and all these players they have, I think you need to take the good with the bad. With Justin Fields, get him out there as early as you can say, hey, he's prepared and he could do it. And hey, you might have some bad games. You might have some games where you only score 9 points or something like that. But if that breakthrough comes, I think that's the only chance how they make the playoffs at the end of the day. I don't think they make it with Andy Dalton. Justin Fields gives them a fighting chance because that upside, because that playmaking ability. So I'm not sitting here and saying he has to start in week 1 because I think there's still some things, some lines that he needs to cross for them and the coaching staff to be comfortable with getting him out there. But at the end of the day, you can't wait forever. You can't be waiting until week 8 or 9 because at that point, it might be very tough to make the playoffs. It's going to be tough either way, but I think Justin Fields has the potential to lead you there. I don't think Andy Dalton has.
Yeah. Just watching that game on Saturday, the Bills on the sidelines look so loose and organized and with it. And Matt Nagy the whole game was sweating during a preseason game. He just looked distraught. I mean, it almost was like he had a sign on him that said fired. Like, he is probably, if I were a betting man, and you can get odds on anything nowadays, he's probably the first coach out of a job in the NFL this season or after this season. It didn't work before, and as you mentioned, I really do think that it's playoffs or bust for his administration there in Chicago, and I don't think they're making the playoffs either way. With that said, probably just roll the dice with Justin Fields. He does have that athletic ability. He looked great running the ball. You know what you're going to get with Andy Dalton already. So I guess just give the keys to Justin Fields and see if he takes you on a miracle run. But with that said, I wonder if Nagy is petty at all because, he's got this great new shiny car in Justin Fields, so to speak, and he's probably not going to be able he's not going to be the one to be able to drive it after this year, so it's like, yeah, I'm going to put this rookie quarterback out here, have him take his lumps, have him show these brilliant flashes, and at the end of the day, I'm getting fired anyway. So, I mean, I don't know which way you go if you're Matt Nagy. Personally, I don't know why the Bears hung on to him after this past year. If they were going to make the change with the quarterback, they probably should just made a change with the whole new regime because now the next coach you bring in, he has to have Justin Fields as his quarterback. If it's Brian Daboll from Buffalo, he's got to come in and he's automatically has to know that he's working with Justin Fields, so that's the type of offense he needs to run. Personally, the Bears may have did themselves a bit of a disservice by not starting clean with the new administration this year because I know Nagy's teams underperformed and then he fired a few assistant coaches and then they underperformed again and whatever. As you mentioned, the NFC North isn't getting any easier. A shout out, Detroit Lions, Tom Kennedy, wide receiver number 85 for Detroit. He was an all-Northeast Conference lacrosse player and an all-Northeast Conference wide receiver, a two-sport star at Bryant University, and he's been on the Lions practice squad the last couple of years, but maybe he has a chance to make the 53 this year. I don't see the Lions as a team that's necessarily deep at the receiver position. Why not give Tom Kennedy a shot? He's actually been their leading receiver in each of the first two preseason games. Great guy in the slot, quickness, speed. Dare I say he's out of that kind of Julian Edelman type mold. Yeah, Tom Kennedy from the Northeast Conference doing big things in the preseason for the Detroit Lions. And then, of course, you mentioned the Vikings, the Packers. Aaron Rodgers is back with the Packers. All that offseason drama is history. So, obviously, they're the team to beat in the NFC North. But as you mentioned, if you're Chicago Bears, you got to look out for them, the Vikings, and then you got the Lions. And even the Lions, they may not be that good, but their head coach wants to bite your kneecaps off. So, you always have to, not a friendly landscape out there in the NFC North if you're the Chicago Bears and Matt Nagy. I know the Bears fans are loyal. It's a great fan base, and I almost feel sorry for them because there doesn't seem much to be excited about, other than maybe they have something in Fields. But as far as championship prospects in the year 2021, not Not so much.
So much. Oh, there you go. I was gonna finish the sentence for you, but I'm with you. I agree. It's just such a weird situation, especially. I mean, we all think, and I don't think we're making this up. I mean, Matt Nagy is clearly on the hot seat if he doesn't make the playoffs this year. Same with Ryan Pace. That regime had a really good chance of just being gone after last season. And it's a weird situation, especially because they do stay, and then a couple weeks before the draft, we hear these rumors from pretty reliable sources saying, hey, the Bears are looking to move up for a quarterback. And I didn't really believe it. I didn't believe it fully. I did have, we were on here on Tailgate Show, had a long discussion with the guys, David Turner and John Murphy, about this. They were sort of saying, I'm silly for somewhat believing in this, because you just don't do it. You just don't have a coach and a GM on the hot seat trading a first-round pick to go get a quarterback, but that's exactly what they did. That leads me to believe, hey, maybe they're not as much on the hot seat as I do think, but at some point, hey, they have been disappointing in the last couple of years. So I do think there's an element to that. It's just an odd situation, and it's not something you want for a rookie quarterback to be changing offensive coordinators, play callers the entire time. And I think that could be something that happens here. Now, if you end up getting Brian Daboll out of this, might be worth the wait, because I think he's fantastic and he's going to be an outstanding coach. Still can't believe the San Diego Chargers, LA Chargers didn't hire him. I thought that was such a great match with Justin Herbert. But anyways, let's get back to that Buffalo offense here for the last talking point quickly, because I need to know which one of these running backs. You got Zach Moss, you got Devin Singletary, even Matt Breida in the mix, who has been productive in the past, had a bad season last year for the Dolphins. But, Ralph, if I'm playing fantasy football, right, which one of these Buffalo Bills running backs do I have to own to potentially win my league? Who's going to be the guy that you think is going to get the most touches?
Well, going into the preseason, I probably would have said Zach Moss. And Devin Singletary is definitely, as far as fantasy football goes, Devin Singletary really underperformed last year. I do like Matt Breida. I think he has a role on the team. But as for the guy who's going to get the primary share of the carries from week one, I don't know if it'll stay this way, but I think Singletary is on track to be running back number one, Zach Moss 1A. With that said, Zach Moss showed flashes during the stretch run last year, but then he gets hurt in the wild card playoff game against Indianapolis, and I don't know if he's fully recovered from that injury yet. He hasn't done much in the preseason, so before the injury last year, it was trending upwards, but I think Singletary, at least in the preseason games, he's performed remarkably well in both preseason games. He's been running hard. He's that kind of in-between the tackles guy. And then the problem is, you think Zach Moss is probably a little stronger than him. Neither of them have that really breakaway speed. That's kind of why they brought Breida into the mix, I think. I think those are your three guys on the 53-man opening day roster. And I think Singletary is a guy who is going to get the lion's share of the work to start off with. And I think he has the potential for maybe an 800-yard season. And, you hope that combined touchdowns, maybe he gets 5 rushing touchdowns and another 3 receiving touchdowns. I would go with Singletary, but the problem is with the Bills, and it's a good thing, their best rusher inside the red zone is Josh Allen. And Allen's had, he had 8 or 9 rushing TDs last year, 9 rushing TDs the year before. So it kind of takes opportunities away from Singletary, Moss, whomever it may be. The other thing is you're going to have to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield. And that's something that Singletary has struggled with at times. He had an awful drop in the AFC Championship game against Kansas City, and then they pretty much benched him for the rest of the game. But if he can, whoever catches the ball better out of the backfield is going to get the most work as the season wears on. With that said, if I'm going for the Bills, put all your eggs in the Josh Allen basket for fantasy. That's the guy you want, obviously. That's the QB1. And, I think a guy that's probably going to be sneaky good is Cole Beasley. Not that he wasn't good last year, nearly 1,000 yards receiving. He would have gotten to 1,000 had he not been injured in that Monday night game against New England. But I think Beasley's going to have a big year. Call me naive, but and it has nothing to do with his stance on vaccinations. But I just think he's made for this offense, and I really think that he works a lot into what Brian Daboll wants to do. And also, you got Emmanuel Sanders as well, and then the insider, the fantasy gurus, they want to talk about Gabriel Davis, who I like as well, but at the end of the day, there are only so many mouths to feed. With that said, I think the Buffalo Bills are going to be throwing the ball an awful lot, 70% of the time. So you may not want to invest in a Bills running back in fantasy. So there you go. I hope I answered your question. I know I tend to be verbose, but it's a Monday morning and I'm pumped up and got a lot of thoughts running through this head and a lot of excitement because it's like 3 weeks away, not even, right? Less than 3 weeks away from NFL opening day. And I have my NEC football on Saturdays, my NFL on Sundays, and life doesn't get much better than it does in the fall. So let's do it. Let's do it. Summer 2021 has been okay, but I certainly won't be sad when that calendar changes to September.
Oh, you're not the only one. We've had terrible weather here in Germany. It's just been raining all the time. Today again, it's not really been a great summer, so I'm excited.
Es regnet hier so in New Jersey.
There you go.
Like this weather.
It is bad weather. I keep telling people, guys like Rick, hey, Ralph, he's a really impressive German speaker. But there you go. You got a little bit of that here to end the show. But we covered all bases. I feel like we could be going on and on, talking about more teams, talking about more preseason performances. But obviously there'll be more shows this week where other hosts are going to be taking over for Rick a couple days this week. But Ralph, like I said, covering all the bases from fantasy football to the actual games. Thanks so much for coming on. Do you have anything to say to the people? But before we end this Monday morning show here,
take a look at some NEC football. As for the folks, I'm a crazy Buffalo Bills fan. I'm an NFL enthusiast, but I also do public relations and promotions for Northeast Conference football, Division I FCS, at NEC Football on Twitter. Check us out. We got games September 2nd, September 3rd, and September 4th. And actually, we'll have our first ESPN 3 featured game on September 11th on the ESPN app. And Coach Kevin Gilbride will be on color commentary for that game. We got Coach Gilbride back in the booth, so that's great. I don't know how the ESPN app works internationally, Lorenz.
I have it. It works.
Okay, but if you can't catch NEC football on the ESPN app, you can go to necfrontrow.com, necfrontrow.com. It's free. It's one-click access, and it works all over the world. will stream all of the home football games for free on there, on demand and live. So for all you football junkies, if you need more football, we have plenty of it for you in the NEC. And if you're an NFL Draft Bible disciple, as Rick says, if you're an NFL Draft Bible disciple and you watch the state of football, then obviously you love football, and there is no such thing as too much football. But with that said, NEC, NFL, I'm ready to go. And thank you, Lorenz, for chopping it up with me this Monday morning. Even though it's only preseason, to me there are still plenty of stories unfolding and plenty of things to talk about when it comes to the NFL.
Yeah, so many things to talk about, and that's almost tough to follow up and give the people a better outro here that you just did. But I think you speak for everyone watching, for all the football fans. I'm excited for preseason football. I'm excited for NEC football. Hey, we got the European League of Football. I watched some of that yesterday. That's great to have European football on my TV finally. So shout out to them. I think I'll be out there in 2 weeks again watching the game live, so I'll be on here to discuss it with everyone. But before I let you go, I just want to say, hey, everyone, go to the NFLDraftBible.com and go read all of our amazing content. There should be a mock draft out there today. Ralph, you can go have a look who I got the builds drafting, although you're probably one of the fans that don't even have mock drafts in the offseason in your minds. But I know there's some of you out there, Some of you, maybe Detroit Lions fans, we just talked about them. You're probably looking more for the 2022 season and looking to have a strong offseason. So there will be a mock draft. Go get the subscription, become a premium member, and keep tuning into the State of Football. We'll be live every weekday morning at 9 a.m. And then also something exciting, we're bringing back the Tailgate Show on Saturdays, 10 a.m. There'll be a bigger announcement on that, but I can say this much. And then you guys are going to get the details a little bit later. So football almost every day, except for Sundays where the games are obviously on. You'll have it here on NFL Draft Bible. Go check out all the content. Go tune back in. And thanks so much for watching. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.